Course tours are presented at the Moodle Exchange Conference to share well-organized courses with interesting designs. In this tour, Christian Dahl shares an anthropology course highlighting the Moodle course roadmap for organization and several interactive learning tools.
I'm Christian Dahl. I'm in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology. I'm an anthropologist. So I was a member of the flipped classroom, although that's hybrid learning cohort with Ignacio, the first ones. That is where this course comes from. So the course I'll talk about, it is called Ant/So 261. So it's a course that is taught in my department. It's I think one of the only classes we teach that's both anthropology and sociology. So it meets a lot of GP requirements, the social sciences requirements specifically. So we get a lot of our majors and a lot of other students taking it, but it's a 200 level class, GP class. So I have to kind of teach it in a somewhat of a wide range for students. So the way that we teach a number of different sections of it, and my goal in redesigning it was to kind of craft a version of the course that I could hand on to others. So hopefully I'll do that after in spring. Delta will do their last assessment, everything that's done, and I'll hopefully hand the class off then. But part of what we did during the year we were redesigning the course, I taught the course a couple times. What we did was we kind of came up with breaking the class into learning steps, right? And so I tried to do this pretty systematically, both in terms of what students were supposed to do before and after class, and also thinking about the different types of class sessions that I had, which more or less I had kind of in my mind that there were days that we do this, days that we do that, but I tried to be more systematic about that with the redesign of the course. So you can kind of see here, I then also broke the steps into different parts. This class, because it's a class that's rooted in the social sciences, but is taught to a wide range of students, the goal of it is to think about both social scientific theoretical concepts, but also to teach students methodologies in the social sciences, especially ethnographic methods and qualitative methods, and sort of practice doing them through topics, but also the class is about technology, right? So specifically about technology, but thinking about theories and also thinking about methods and implementing them. So the learning steps kind of broke down consistently, and I think this was one of the strongest things about redesigning this and working with the brilliant minds at Delta to kind of think about how to break everything down, was the students always began with what I called engaging with big ideas, which was big topics, theory, kind of general, broad frameworks that we're thinking about. And that kind of usually involved watching short lectures that I posted and doing readings. And then applying big ideas was my term for kind of in-class discussion of topics. I would usually run over, kind of reiterate a little bit of what I said in the mini lectures that they watched, but then we would kind of talk about examples and talk about specific passages from text and things like that. So that's really, so you can see there how it's broken down into engaging with big ideas was before class, right? And then in class, we kind of did classwork where we applied what we learned in particular ways. And then the idea was then on the Wednesday meeting of the class, we either were thinking about essay projects, I'll talk about that in a second, but thinking towards the project, or kind of doing a little bit more of reflecting on the concepts we talked about, usually by watching films. So Monday was always kind of in class, kind of discussion-based work, and then Wednesday was always either watching a film or workshopping projects, kind of talking about projects and kind of doing some scaffolding work towards submitting their essays. Yeah. So they had essays due a couple points in the semester. So I'll show you the actual site in a second, but this kind of breaks down what it looked like. So each unit had a topic, tried to be interesting and fun, kind of topics that we were talking about, and then broken down by week, and you can kind of see each step. This is what's nice about the course roadmap, is you see each step has a graphic, right? So it's pretty obvious. Here's where you're going to be watching lectures and reading stuff, and here's where we're going to be discussing. And then here's where we're going to actually be workshopping your projects. So at the end of each unit, they would have an assignment due, right? So the first one is what I call a thick description of a non-human actor. Basically, they have to write about like how do technologies exist in the world and be in relationship with people and other things. So they would have that due at the end, but as you can see, there's kind of a workshopping component the week before, right? So they would have done some kind of initial brainstorming, then workshopping, and then finally submitting it. And similarly, the next time, they'll similarly do some kind of thinking and discussion and workshopping and then submitting. At the end, you can also see here, this is kind of a self-assessment component, metacognitive activities part at the end. And then similarly, the other parts of the class, the third unit, Why We Post, which is about social media, and they do a project on memes, which they really enjoy. They have to find memes, and they have to apply literary theory to memes and kind of talk about how they mean what they mean. And it's always a lot of fun because I have them throw out, what are the memes that you're coming across these days? And then I have to quickly research all these memes that they've come up with. And then the last unit of the class is a lot of fun because I have them do what's called a cyborg autoethnography. So basically they have to study themselves as technological entities, right? Like all the technology that they interact with, how do they interact with it, what do they do? And we do a lot more in this unit's a little bit longer because they learn some terms and they learn a little bit about ethnographic field work and like note taking, even though they're taking notes on themselves, but they're also learning about what it means to code and kind of sort data as qualitative data, right? So they're doing a bit of that. So we're doing a bunch of that in class as part of their project. So they're going along and then they kind of submit it towards the end, right? But it's all kind of scaffolded along the way, right? So yeah, so why don't I show you I can show you a little bit more what it looked like in the class. So I will add that I worked with Delta through the grant on building this roadmap, and there was no way I would have built this beautiful roadmap on my own. And I especially learned that when I tried afterwards to build one in a couple days, and I was like, oh, this involves a lot more than I was used to. I didn't realize, made me, it humbled me in terms of how much it involves to get this thing going and to make it look as good as it does. But you'll see with the roadmap, what I did was, it's broken down by units, right? And then weeks, and then days, or more like activities, which really are days. So when you go to the week, you get the kind of type of activity that's there, what they're supposed to do. And then here, I mostly had I used POSIT for the mini lectures, although there were some weirdness with it feeding back to Moodle and like having it complete correctly. So I'll have to kind of assess that next time, but it didn't always pass back. So I had students telling me like, I watched the mini lecture 3 times and to get it to close the loop. And I was like, no, you shouldn't have to do that. But sometimes it just wasn't, I don't think it was set up. I don't know what I did that it wasn't always sending the information back exactly correctly. But what's really nice about this is you see how when you get into each section with the roadmap and the completion, right, each thing is broken down. And what I did was I used YellowDig. So I used YellowDig and I also used TopHat. So for the kind of pre-meeting work, they were supposed to post something on YellowDig in advance. I didn't super structure it, right? Because YellowDig, the whole point is they kind of do what they like. But I said, one thing you can do is write a kind of question or a thought about what you learned from the readings or from the lecture and post something on YellowDig before you meet. So you can kind of see that here, that it says, and it would take you straight to YellowDig. And I used hashtags, which sometimes worked well with YellowDig. Sometimes they had to type them exactly correctly for them to link up. So sometimes that was good. Sometimes it didn't work perfectly, but it was really helpful. And it did make them engage in a way and kind of consistently start thinking about topics before we met in class, right? So it was really nice for keeping the conversation going, like before class and in between meetings, because I also used it for, I see down here, so reflecting on big ideas was always like the film and discussing the film and like doing a little write-up about it. And I would say, kind of do that, write this up and post it on YellowDig, write it in a certain kind of form. And then the other thing I found helpful was for in-class discussions, I would use, sometimes TopHat, and TopHat, you can have that kind of forum discussion. So people could like post something up, it would be like a live discussion board kind of going as they're doing. So I always tried to have some kind of deliverable with each of the steps in the process. And I think it worked pretty well. I think it's pretty clear. It ends up being, like a lot of things. You can see here down here, workshopping, and then the essay submission is like right there in the page, right kind of where it belongs. So that's kind of how I use the roadmap. And as I said, and what's great about the roadmap, it has this beautiful like sort of completion, right? So like really satisfying seeing where you're at, seeing that you've completed each thing, and having these graphic illustrations of like, this is what we're doing when, right? Like especially when it was a hybrid class where we were meeting twice a week, but I was expecting them to do a lot beforehand, and I was also trying to scaffold these assignments. They always were fairly oriented in terms of like what was happening when and what was kind of expected of them, and what we were doing, which I think was good because it's a little bit of a complicated class in a way. And I think having all this stuff there, all this material and all this framing, let them focus in on the content and the course ideas and feel kind of like they knew what they had to do and what they were doing all the time. And I will say that, so that's generally what the class looked like. It was pretty smooth. I think the things I would change, I would probably try to figure out a way to have the assignments, like the unit, the kind of unit assignments pop up in their own section maybe as well, in addition to be on the roadmap, because the only tough thing about the roadmap is then if you want to go to a specific part of it, it sometimes is hard to navigate to this specific like activity under a thing. So especially with I would have to go to the right week and then find the right spot. So sometimes navigation is, there's a lot going on sometimes. So so like see here, like here's the essay, it's all the way at the bottom. So maybe that's the thing I'd like to work on the most next, is like making that a little bit more prominent, or have like a couple different ways to get at some parts of the roadmap or some parts of the course content, which I just didn't spend the time to figure out how to do exactly. So I like this a lot. I thought this was really good for this class. And then I will say though that I also am a fan of the kind of no frills, simple Moodle site as I'm doing with my other. I really also like this tiles format. So for other courses I've taught, I have gone almost the opposite direction, where I've said there's just a little bit here. There's just the kind of somewhat bare bones but quite organized sections with no calendar or anything, but just all the classwork. So I'm finding that I like thinking about what makes sense for the class that I'm in at the moment. I don't know how much more time I have. Kind of went through everything, but I'm happy to just chat about and answer. We can answer questions together, I guess.
So, do you have assessments within the roadmap, or are they not in the roadmap?
They are built in at the end of. You mean in terms of their self-assessments?
Or just like is everything in the course that they deliver captured in the roadmap?
It's everything that they do is in the roadmap somewhere. So like the essays are in the roadmap in that when they're due. The YellowDig they're getting a grade on, but like it's always linked to from a part of the roadmap. So everything they're doing is in every deliverable is in the roadmap, so they can follow along kind of there. It's unlike your class. It's like very rigid in terms of the layout which is good and bad, right? Like I think it's quite good, but it does mean that like if I wanted to move things, there's a kind of cascade effect in terms of shifting things around, right? So that's the only I would say that's like kind of my only reservation a little bit about it. But like that's also partly my not knowing how to adjust things a simple way. I was kind of manually making all the adjustments. So maybe, But everything is on the roadmap. Everything is built, is linked up there. So you can kind of follow along.